and welcome this morning to our Mayoral breakfast. The focus is on Hutt City and where we're going for the next 10 years. So it's a pleasure to host Mayor Campbell. Campbell, thank you so much for coming this morning and sharing what the next 10 years looks like. It was very clear to me when we started organising this that due to COVID last year, actually we haven't done much of this at all because everything got based around what we could do to get through what was 2020. So it's fabulous to host you today, Campbell, and to have the opportunity to hear directly from you and to ask questions of Council of what's coming forward for the next 10 years. So a warm welcome to you all, and as you know, the Chamber and the Hutt City Council are a very productive working relationship. We work very closely with Hutt City Council, and together we're a really strong voice for the region, and we provide a lot of opportunity and process around engaging the business community and making sure the business community has a strong voice into local government. It's very, very important. It's not until you sit on some of the other meetings and other government type structures and you realise there's not many people there standing up for business, and that's what this chamber is all about, and that's why it's very important to have a strong relationship where we can be very open and frank about what is best for the business community. And there are many people in the room today who we work with closely, and I'm going to note someone in particular, and that's Gary Craig. So Gary Craig has worked with the chamber on behalf of the council for many years, and has developed, we just have a fabulous working relationship. Gary, I just want to take the opportunity to thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure to work with you, and your knowledge and your ability to make things simple and quick and efficient is really appreciated by this chamber. Thank you. So this breakfast is about sharing information between the council and the business community when it comes to how we all see our city in the coming decade. It's about taking a look at what is in the council's long-term plan and how it affects business, and giving you all the opportunity to provide your business perspective into the planning process that the Hutt City Council is currently undertaking. So I'm sure you'll find this very useful, also in considering what opportunities and challenges you are facing in the current climate that we're all trying to run our businesses in, and we're all trying to adapt. Obviously, I've talked to many people this morning, and there's so much on. The business community is so busy with so much challenge and a completely new environment to work on. So we have some special guests. We have the first one on my list is Jo Miller, but Jo's actually unfortunately ill this morning and has put in her apology. And the same with our president of the chamber. He's also texted me last night. He's very unwell as well. So he apologises too for not being able to be here. But can I welcome Councillor Deborah Hislop. Nice to see you, Deborah. Thank you for coming. We have Deputy Mayor of Upper Hutt City Council, Helen Swales. I know, Helen, you're here from a JSP perspective, but I do want to welcome you from a Upper Hutt City perspective as well. And Wellington Regional Council CEO, Darren Ponter, is here. Darren, thank you for coming. And councillors from Wellington Regional Council, Prue Lamison, Prue, great to see you again. And I think we've got David Lee as well. Hi, David. Chamber partners, Platinum Partner Gibson Sheep. There's many people here from Gibson Sheep this morning, so thank you all for coming. And Silver Partners, Macomb Consulting and Link Wellington. We have a few Chamber board members this morning. Vice President Dave Morgan, who was over this side of the room earlier on, Sarah Wilson, Mike Gould, Tony McCone and June Ranson. So if you want to talk to anyone about the Chamber, there's plenty of us here this morning as well. A little bit of housekeeping. Bathrooms are through the hallway. The evacuation procedure is down the stairs and out onto Dowse Square. Obviously, if it was an earthquake, drop cover hole before we then take further action. Can I please ask you to pop your phones on silent? And please also note that photos are being taken and we are live streaming this event. So if you don't want to take part in that, please do let everyone in the chamber team know. The purpose of events such as this one is to ensure the business community has a voice, and that as business people we get to express our perspective on what is being proposed. As a chamber, it is a pleasure to bring together regularly the most senior and expert stakeholders across a wide range of events and topics from the whole region and sometimes the country as well. Last week we had Brad Olsen, economist from Infometrics, for a lunch, and it was very useful and interesting. And clearly we've had a fabulous response to this event, so I really appreciate your support and you taking the opportunity to hear from Hutt City Council and our Mayor. It is an opportunity for us all to discuss the issues that are important to us as a business community. We will have Campbell will make a presentation, and then we will have a Q&A session at the end, so please hold your questions to the end, and we will be using a microphone so everybody can hear everybody else's questions, so please one at a time, and our on-chamber team will bring you this microphone so you can speak into that. As a chamber, we value robust and constructive discussion and expression, and the business community needs to be heard. So please take this opportunity, please write down your questions, please do ask them, don't leave this room going, I should have asked about that, because that's actually not very useful for anybody. But please remember that this is not Facebook, which is a pretty dreadful mechanism for some things, and the people here are keen to share their knowledge, information, and expertise. There's many Hutt City Council officers here who are experts in their area, so please hold your questions to the end, but please do ask them, and so that we could all benefit from them as well. So as I finish, I'd just like to welcome Campbell. I don't think I've ever called you your worship, the Mayor Campbell, because we talk on live streams and Facebook and on the phone a lot. So welcome, thank you so much for coming this morning. Really looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Ka tangi te titi, ka tangi te kaka, ka tangi huki ko tihei muriora. Kia ora e morena everyone, thank you for the invitation to be able to speak. It is a real great privilege to be here to speak to our business community here in Lower Hutt. Can I acknowledge you, Helen, and all of your team for putting on this event. It is a good opportunity for us to be able to speak with you directly and also to answer any questions that may come up as well. But also a special acknowledgement to you and all your team for the efforts over the last 12 months. In the face of COVID-19, I think I have not seen many people work harder than Helen and her team over the last 12 months in supporting our business community. I actually think you deserve a bit of a round of applause. And also to acknowledge all of you who are in business across our city in different sectors for the uncertain times we have been facing with COVID-19. It has been tricky, and that obviously that uncertainty still continues today, but we are, I think, starting to track in the right direction as a country and globally as we get on top of the pandemic. So really, this long-term plan, every 3 years we have the opportunity to develop a long-term plan, and that's set out in the Local Government Act. And this really sets out our vision and our priorities for the next 10 years as a city. And now is our opportunity to come out to our communities and engage with you to see if we're on the right track with what we're proposing, and then we're going to make some final decisions in June with all of that feedback and consultation. So I really would appreciate if you do take the time to be able to submit, and I'll share some of those details a little bit later on. So we know we face some big challenges here in Te Awakarangi, Lower Hutt, particularly when it comes to our infrastructure. We know we're facing a trifecta of issues when it comes to our underground infrastructure, when it comes to the age of that infrastructure, when it comes to underinvestment over a number of decades, and that's not just a challenge here in Lower Hutt, but it's the story of New Zealand, and also the challenge of growth. We've seen our city population reach its 2030 population target 10 years early, last year, getting to 110,000. So we have seen our population significantly grow, particularly in the last 5 to 6 years here in Lower Hutt. Prior to that, we were probably around 100,000, going up and down slightly for about 20 to 30 years prior. So you can see that increase is significant, and it's expected to continue. We also know we have a major challenge with housing in our city. We have a housing crisis across the country. Prices continue to rise here in Lower Hutt, as in the rest of the region and the country as well. And we also have a major challenge with rents and people having to fork out more of their income to be able to afford to pay for their rent. Alongside that, of course, we have COVID-19. We continue to operate in a pretty uncertain environment, an uncertain world, but it does feel like we are obviously seeing some light at the end of the tunnel there. While there are challenges with COVID-19, I think our response as a country and as a city here in Lower Hutt has meant that there are actually some opportunities at the other side of this, particularly when we think around our reputation as a country, given our response and the likes. And also, of course, alongside all of these big challenges, we have to keep front of mind is our financial sustainability as a city, and of course for our ratepayers across the city as well. So, tackling some of these big challenges, we are proposing, I suppose the main theme of this plan is actually around getting the basics right. And what we are proposing is a doubling of our capital investment program over the next 10 years. We're proposing to go to 1.4 billion, which previously was around at 650 million over the 10-year period. So that is a significant increase in our capital program. We're also looking to take a balanced financial approach to that, so looking at how we can use obviously our debt limits and also fee development contributions and the likes, changing some of the policies around that, and also of course looking at rates, which is a key part of it. We've been really conscious that obviously with a significant increase in spend in those basic infrastructure needs, we are conscious of what that means for people in their back pocket and rates increases. So we have been working really hard to do a base budget review, and we're able to save around 5.2 million in operational spend each year. So that's year-on-year spend, and that's avoided us to have to look at a larger rates increase. And what we're proposing for the next financial year is 5.9%, with rates increases averaging between 4.9 and 6.8 over the 10 years of the plan at different points. And what we're trying to do there is paint a far more realistic picture, I think, than maybe what we have done in the past of the true cost of investment in infrastructure and the needs of our city. So we're really keen to get your thoughts on that. So in the plan, we've got 6 key priority areas. As you'll see here, I won't talk through them because I'm going to go through each of them. But what I will say is that these priorities have been created through a range of consultation and engagement with our Maniwhenua partners, with the Chamber of Commerce, with a range of different stakeholders and groups going into last year and earlier this year. So these are priorities which have been developed over that time, and I'll go through each of them one by one. So the infrastructure investment which we're talking about, just to give you a bit of a breakdown of what that actually means, is through water infrastructure investment is proposed to go to 582 million over the 10-year plan. And I suppose just touching on that briefly, while it's sort of high level and it's hard to understand exactly what that means, I know when I go out there to our communities and particularly to our business community, what it means if our infrastructure fails. It means you have to close your shop for the day. It means that people can't get to you or you're unable to function. And we have seen some high-profile breakages in Wellington City. We've been fortunate not to have that happen in Lower Hutt or other parts of the region yet, but it will happen. It will happen if we don't front up to the rules, to the true state of our infrastructure and have a plan to invest and turn things around. When it comes to transportation, I think all of you will know the challenges we are seeing with transport in our city. It's getting harder to get around, and that is I suppose a mixture of not seeing an investment over a period of time, but also the population growth that we're experiencing. We've seen that in the likes of areas like Petone, but even in residential areas like Wainuiomata, Stokes Valley, and on the Western Hills, it's become more challenging to be able to get out of those communities. So we are having a particular focus on that. We are also doing an integrated transport plan at this stage, looking at all elements of transport within our city. Obviously, we need to work closely with our regional partners, Greater Wellington Regional Council and Wakakatahi as well, NZTA, on that. So how can we get people who don't need to be in their vehicles onto public transport or into active forms of transport, but also what projects can we invest in for resilience and other benefits in the city as well. A huge part of that particular spend is the Cross Valley Link Connection program. Now this is a project which has been talked about well before I was even born. I'd say, I think 1960s it was originally planned, and but it is still absolutely needed in our city. So Part of that program is not just around a road, an east to west connection across the city onto State Highway 2, but it's also around multimodal options, freeing up the Esplanade for other opportunities, rapid bus links and the like. So there's actually quite a bit of opportunity in that, and I'd be keen to gauge you on your views. Of course, there's still going to be challenges with congestion or getting onto State Highway 2, and there's the conversation around to actually change that. Is Petone to Granada, that Granada link needed, particularly for the region as well, and that's obviously an active conversation we need to have as a region. Also, what I would label as our community infrastructure, Nainai Pool. We know the closure of Nainai Pool has had a significant impact on the local Nainai community, but also on the city and on the region as well in regards to having that facility open. We are proposing to spend $68 million on a new Nainai pool. We've been able to get a $27 million grant from co-funding from the Crown Infrastructure Partners with the COVID-related funding that was announced last year. That is a really good win for ratepayers, and obviously as a vote of confidence in that particular project. We are also engaging on whether we scale that project back to a $54 million option. What that in essence means is that we'd have to scale back on the scope of the pool and what it looks like. It would still be a great facility, but it may not be an Olympic-sized pool. It may not be able to provide the sorts of regional or national events that a higher option would. So we're keen to get people's thoughts on that. And also with Petone Wharf, for some time now, we've just been doing patch-up jobs, quite frankly, on the wharf. And there was an event earlier this year, a couple of small earthquakes, which did some further damage. So what we're proposing here is to bring forward that investment to just get on top of that particular wharf and actually invest what is needed, rather than continuing to patch it up and have to spend that sort of money in the future anyway. So this gives you a bit of an idea of the capital program versus previous years. So in 2021, with our annual plan, we did there was a bit of an emergency budget with COVID, with what we were facing in COVID, but we did increase through water spend then to a smaller level. But as you'll see here, it is a significant increase in our capital program over the next few years and then beyond as well. One of the big challenges we'll have, and I'll be completely upfront about that, is certainly the capacity to deliver, because we know that councils across the region are looking to increase their spend on their infrastructure and the likes. That will be a challenge for all councils, and it's going to be so important that we're able to work closely together. So while we have the money in the budget, we actually need to be able to be delivering on the ground and putting that investment in place. So priority number 2 is around caring for and protecting our environment. And some of the initiatives we're looking at here are around, I suppose, what council can do in this space. We're proposing to decarbonise all of our council facilities. That's around a $9 million investment over 10 years. By 2030, we're hoping to remove natural gas. Excuse me. For that, around 6 of our pool facilities produce around 80% of our natural gas, just to give you an idea of where most of that actually comes from. So for some of our facilities, it will actually be quite easy to remove natural gas, much more difficult when it comes to the pools, or a higher cost, I suppose, to be able to implement that. We're also wanting to encourage more electric vehicles in the city within our own council fleet, but also in the wider city itself. We're looking at initiatives, and of course making sure we have the infrastructure to support those electric vehicles as well to be able to operate. We're also looking at new commercial buildings with green building ratings in regards to doing our part by the environment, and obviously making sure that the buildings we build are sustainable for the future as well. And when it comes to our Silverstream landfill, this is, I'm sure some of you have heard about the rubbish and recycling changes we're making from the 1st of July. A big part of that, and also a number of other initiatives, is around how do we extend the life of the Silverstream landfill? How do we make sure that in my lifetime, or my working life, we aren't having to have a conversation around where do we put the next landfill? That is really the core thing which we're looking at with the changes we're making. And we think with a number of changes that we make, and it is a journey on that, we believe we can extend that asset by another 20 years. So currently it's got about 20 to 30 years on it. We think we can add another 20 years by making some changes now, looking at also resource recovery, so things that are currently, aside from household waste, things that are currently going to the landfill that could actually be diverted out and used in a more productive way. increasing housing supply. As you'll know, as I'm sure you all know, if you're living here in the Hutt, there is a significant amount of intensification occurring across the city with some of the changes council has made and also initiatives from central government. So we are seeing a bit of a shift in housing growth. However, that is still not keeping up with the demand that we're seeing. Obviously, we live in a regional and a national market when it comes to house prices. However, we do know that people are still struggling to be able to find homes in our city. So a big part of that is obviously looking at our district plan. How do we balance up the need between more houses and amenity value in the area? How do we get more apartment buildings in our CBD, more people living in our CBD who don't require cars to be able to get around? And all of that will be part of our district plan review, which we're also doing some engagement on at the moment, which I do hope you all are able to submit on that. And also some other initiatives around Urban Plus. So Urban Plus is essentially council's housing development arm, and we've done a bit of a shift in their focus. For a long time they were focused purely on essentially providing houses to the market. 6-7 years ago, when Lower Hutt was barely getting a dozen houses a year being built in some cases, there was a good case for that. But what we're saying now is actually the need is to be supporting those families and people who need that support the most. And so that's a bit of a shift and some engagement we're asking, or consultation we're wanting to do on that change as well. Number 4, supporting an innovative and agile economy and attractive city. So I suppose under this, we obviously want to get the basics right with our infrastructure and our needs, and I think the foundations of our city are absolutely crucial to be able to operate and to thrive. Also, we need to be thinking about those transformational projects, and one of them, of course, which I'm sure you're all aware of, is the investment in Riverlink. So we are proposing to increase spend on that, or what was in the budget, which was always not enough, which Councillor Prue-Lamison always reminded me, certainly when I was first elected as Mayor. So previously we've had around 50 million in the budget. We're proposing to increase that to 122 million, and we think we can get around 20 million back on that by the end of the project. So that is a significant increase, and that shows our commitment and seriousness to making sure that that is a project which transforms our city. It is undoubtedly the biggest opportunity, but also the biggest risk if we don't get it right and we don't front up with the opportunity that's there. Alongside Riverlink, of course, we've got our partners in the Regional Council who are working on the flood protection side of things, and also Wapiti and TA on the Mayoral interchange. And I'm more than happy to field any questions if you have that, have any on that later on. The only thing I would say is flagging, and I know there's been some good sessions, Helen, which you've helped lead, around the open heart surgery. I think, Colour, as you've described it as we go through the project itself, there is going to be some significant short-term pain, particularly around car parking and the likes, and how we get around the city while the work is undertaken. We currently have around 950 car parks in the Riverbank car park itself. About 650 of them on any given day are used. We're going to drop down to about 100 while the project is being done. So we will have a net loss of about 550 car parks which are currently used. So we are currently exploring what that means, obviously, for our CBD, for our workers, for people who are coming to our retailers as well. So that is a work in progress. And of course, with the Riverbank market, we're wanting to see how we can make sure that we retain that in the city as well. We don't want Helen poaching for another half. So also just on that, there's a couple of projects happening in suburban areas as well, in Nainai. So we're doing a spatial plan in Nainai alongside the pool. It's around a $9 million investment. We're looking at what we can do with the old post office building there, and also some other buildings which have been derelict for some time or underutilised. And also in Wainuiomata, we're proposing to spend $4.4 million on a streetscape program to work in with the redevelopment of the lawn and the new countdown and the lights. And this really is a spend or investment which has come off the back of the work of Love Wainuiomata, so I do Clive for your work on that over the last 5-6 years. And what we're proposing to do is essentially look at that civic area, community space in Queen Street CBD. So I'm happy to share some more information if you're interested in that. Number 5, connecting communities. So really this is a pretty broad category. Probably think, what does that mean? And it really is around how do we work with our stakeholders in our community organisations, who are the lifeblood of our community, and making sure that we're supporting our people and creating vibrant spaces. So a big part of that, of course, is our own hubs and own council facilities, and how we can work closely with community on making our spaces and places thrive. So we're again wanting to engage people on what do those facilities look like, what do the uses look like, because they are obviously an important part of our community. And finally, financial sustainability. This is obviously absolutely key to any of the changes that or the vision and plan that we're outlining here. And as I touched on before, we're proposing a rates increase of 5.9% for the next financial year. For the other years, it ranges between 4.9 and 6.8. And that again is about trying to paint a fair picture of what the cost of this type of investment looks like. Alongside that, we're also looking at development contributions. So if you're a developer and you're wanting to put 10 houses on a site that previously had 2, currently under our policy you would only pay a fraction of the actual cost of the impact on the infrastructure in the surrounding area. We're proposing to increase that to 100%. So developers essentially pay for the cost of their development in the area. So that really is about making sure that they're paying their fair share, that burden isn't sitting on the general rates pool, but also we want to make sure that the investment is actually going into our infrastructure, which will enable more development to happen in the future as well. So that is absolutely key. So on that, it would depend on where you are in the city, depending on what sort of change you're looking at there. So it would vary. For example, in Wainuiomata it would be higher, and some other parts of the city would actually be lower, your contributions. Another side of that, of course, is around debt investment, and I think Brad Olsen's made this point very well when he's come and spoken in Hutt, and I think across the country. Now is the time to invest. It is the time to take advantage of low interest rates, and particularly what local government has access to. And it makes sense for us to be able to use our debt capacity or our borrowing ability to be able to make a lot of this investment, because these are investments that will be intergenerational, and it shouldn't be all burdened on current ratepayers. Okay, just going to the next one, which is a change that we're proposing to our rates differential. So as you likely or possibly be aware, over the past 10 years there has been a policy in place which has seen the differential change significantly over that time. From that, the council's view is it went a little bit too far than what it was sort of intended to do originally at the time. If we look back to 2010, the idea was to get to around 60% of the rates burden to sit with residential ratepayers, and around 37% to sit with the commercial ratepayers. So we're proposing to do a slight change to that over the next 3 years, and we're very keen to obviously hear your feedback, because I know this will be a topic which is of particular interest to you. And that again, I suppose, is a reflection of where the plan is going as well, and what we're focusing on, particularly when it comes to that infrastructure spend, which we know will be of significant value, and it's the one thing that I hear, other than skill shortages, that is of need in the city to get us moving when it comes to transport and our through waters as well. This graph here just gives you a bit of an idea of where every $100 you spend, this is an example for a residential ratepayer, not necessarily a commercial ratepayer, because you've got waste and recycling in there as well. But this gives you an idea of every $100 you give in rates, where it actually goes. So this has been quite helpful actually in trying to communicate to people how much you actually get for the rates that you pay. And I would put the challenge out there, while no one likes rates increases, and it's always a difficult conversation to have, the amount of services that is able to provide in our community is pretty significant. And if you look at your insurance bill or your electricity bill or other bills that you pay, often they're far greater or the same as all of the services that the council is able to provide. So I think that's just giving some context to the range of things that we do as a council. So we're open until the 6th of May for feedback on this long-term plan, so we're really keen to hear your thoughts, feedback. any questions or comments that come from here today, we've got officers who will be making notes, so we'll make sure we capture that. But we really would encourage you to submit formally to our plan. We're really conscious of the fact that residential ratepayers outnumber significantly commercial ratepayers, so we do want you to be able to submit and engage so we can get a good picture and a good feeling of what you think around this plan, and particularly as business people. So we really would appreciate that. And finally, so what happens next? So we get all the feedback by the 6th of May, and then we have our hearings, which are in the middle of May, so you also have the opportunity to come and speak, and then we're able to go away and make our decisions in early June, which would be finalised for the 1st of July. So that gives you a bit of an idea on that. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you very much for, again, the opportunity to speak to you on the long-term plan. I'm happy to field any questions.
So we'll use this microphone and we'll bring it to you if you've got a question. So please pop your hand up and wait for the microphone to come. Someone must have it. Helen?
Kia ora, and thank you for your hospitality. It's been great. My question is around the rates differential that you've got, and being here the representative of 230 businesses along Jackson Street, we want to understand or have a better explanation of the rates differential commercial from the CBD to suburban. Why is there the difference, and what is it that we're not getting or getting with it? Because suburban rates are going up higher than what central CBD is.
Yes, so the main reason why you're seeing a significant difference there is because of revaluation of Queensgate. So their value has increased, I believe, Jenny, by 295 million, because they had a significant drop with the Kaikoura earthquake. So now we've got Queensgate, who is a part of the central commercial business district or rating category. So that then offsets values and changes in that category. So that's why you would see a difference there between central and suburban.
So you wouldn't think of actually leveling that out?
It's very difficult to do that when it comes to valuation changes, and the challenge you have there is you've got the largest ratepayer in the city who's going up by 290 million. So that doesn't increase council's rate take, but it changes the share of who pays what. So the share for other central businesses is lower.
Hi, Prue Emerson. First of all, I want to say thank you, but secondly, I have a concern. So I want to say thank you for the huge increase in money that you're putting in your long-term plan for Riverlink. I'm absolutely delighted as a long-term Hutt Valley resident. So. All my life, in fact. I'm delighted that you're going to take this opportunity. I think the Riverlink project itself will be a game changer for the Hutt City, and it'll be great if it all, and I know it won't all happen at once, much as I'd like it to, but it's great to see that you are committed to making that happen. So as well as the floodworks, which will be a life-changing event for some people in the Hutt Valley, and Wakakatari with the bridge, it'll be great if the CBD is brought back to life as I remember it as a kid. And then just my concern, there are houses popping up all over the place, or I shouldn't say houses, developments. I live not far from Waifatu Road on the Eastern Hills, and without a word of a lie, I can drive into, and I know I should catch this train, but I don't. I can drive into Greater Wellington in the morning, and I can come back later on in the day, and where there was a house, there was just a pile of sticks. And then the next time you see the foundations happening for anything from 4 to 24 in Freiburg Street, properties going up. And my concern is just the stormwater, really. And there are very few. Well, it appears to me there's very little consideration given to to stormwater and the fact that there is very little green space. So the stormwater has no chance to disappear into the ground. So permeable surfaces, there seems to be virtually none, instead of which it runs down and overflows and can cause, of course, problems with the pipe issue. So I do have a concern. I think it's great that the building, mostly great that the building is happening, but I do have a concern, particularly with the problems we're having with infrastructure.
I think it's a very good point, Prue, and that is why also we're looking to double our investment in water infrastructure, stormwater. There is a particular focus on water and sewage supply, but also stormwater capacity with those developments. Very conscious of that fact. There is assessments that happen when the development occurs. However, there's no question that when you replace grass with concrete, it's going to create more challenges. So that is a focus for us. Thanks.
One question?
It's only the politicians asking the questions.
There must be some business-focused questions, yeah?
Thank you. Good morning, Malcolm Galloway from Gibson Sheet. On the topic of infrastructure, development infrastructure contributions, I've heard of some instances where developers will be going from, say, $6,000 to $26,000 per dwelling. I see in the news this morning that Judith Collins is proposing to introduce legislation to the House to give councils greater powers and various other things, but one of the elements of that would be a $50,000 infrastructure grant for every dwelling over and above the council's 5-year historical average. If that were to go through, would you expect there to be some scaling back of the contributions from developers?
Yeah, good question. I haven't caught up on the detail from what the National Party proposed there. However, so it'd be difficult to say without seeing that context. There's no question that we have a huge issue with how we fund infrastructure, and that's why we're looking at development contributions. Otherwise, essentially the only other way to pay for it is through the rates. So our hands as a council are so seriously tied when it comes to funding mechanisms and avenues that it's not funded. So I know that that's a particular issue for us. I know the government also with their $3.5 billion announcement around how they can support what the infrastructure needs to encourage development. We're really keen to see exactly what that means on the ground. I think we're looking, hopefully there'll be some announcements shortly on that, because that would obviously enable more development to occur as well. But certainly if the playing field changed and we had other revenue sources, we would most definitely look at development contributions and what sort of rate they're at. We want to find that optimal level of obviously the investment that's needed and not also increasing the cost of housing supply as well. But I would say that some of the increases we're proposing represent about a week's increase in the value of housing at the moment. Like it's pretty small in the scheme of where the market's currently going. Thanks.
I was going to say one, but no.
No one else put their hand up.
Questions?
So
Good.
actually follows on around the contribution of financial development and knowing that Petone is one of the places that is earmarked for infill housing and certainly some development. So with regard to that, when your expectation around the three waters and transport with the development, how do you factor in or weight when they're connecting to aged infrastructure? Is it their cost to actually pick up that, to bring it up to what the expectation is around, or is there a matrix that's going to be applied for that?
Yeah, so essentially with development contributions, how they work is that depending on so the city gets carved into different catchment areas for what you pay. For example, in Wainuiomata, we know we have some significant infrastructure issues over there. So we then would set a rate for what your development contribution would go towards, and that would be around upgrades on the main. So obviously the developer would take care of the pipes needed to connect to the main, and then it would be, well, what investment are we going to be is going to be required with 10 more houses putting their stuff from their houses into that pipe. And that's a bit of a calculation or a formula that gets created on that. So it's very difficult. I couldn't go into detail on it, but it is specific to those areas.
John, I'm here with the Jackson Street program. I've got two questions, but in infrastructure, you mentioned car parking with, Brookbank there, but Jackson Street's got, I think it's 220 businesses, which could provide better, more economic value to the city in terms of commerce and jobs. The infrastructure that is really short there is car parking. And I've got a business there. Every day I hear people say now, I don't come any longer because I can't park. They don't come. People love going. There's more investment in buildings. People love that formula of the old buildings done up. But I've never heard council anywhere look at car parking for Jackson Street. I know the one in the city crashed terribly, so maybe you got your fingers burned. But there's an absolute need for parking. And I know that the current thinking is about public transport and bikes, which is great, but the reality is it's a destination and people drive from all over the Wellington region, so public transport it's part of the solution, but we don't have enough car parks, and that's not in the plan at all.
Yeah, to be quite honest, it's a very difficult problem to solve because you just don't have the space, and to be quite honest, also car parking is also a bit of an uneconomic use of land if we were to try and purchase land to put cars in there, for example. We know that that's just not the best use of it. I wish I had the answer or the silver bullet for it, but there is that combination, as you alluded to, around how do we encourage more people to use other forms of transport to get to these spaces, how do we encourage more people to be living in the area, which supports those local retailers. But if there is any particular proposals or thoughts of where we think it could work or what we could invest in or where there's issues, we are open ears on that, and that's where we are keen to get that feedback. There is no silver bullet on it, unfortunately.
I think there are solutions, but they fall on deaf ears. We'll talk to council. The other one is there's so much building, residential, and there isn't enough. It's a great opportunity for Lower Hutt to increase its population. It's a great place to live, and but the constraint is labour. We just don't have enough people from the start of planning to the end of every single building trade. I'm working with developers in one of my other hats that I wear. They can't get builders now to do a 6-house development in Stoke Scotty for 12 months. So you just cannot get, that's just builders, but there's planners, there's everything. It's really a national level problem, but I don't know what we can do on a regional level, but we have to bring them in from overseas. I know the challenge with COVID and the border is the thing, but we need more people building. We don't have enough unemployed people to all go in the building industry. But that's a major infrastructure constraint, and I just don't hear anybody at any level of governance talking about what we can do to improve it.
No, I 100% agree. That is the big issue. It's all well and good putting money into budgets and to say what we're going to do or investment we're wanting to see. We actually need the people to be able to do the work. This is a regular conversation we have with the Chamber of Commerce. I would say that it is on the radar of government and looking at different ways to obviously provide incentives or initiatives for young people to get into the trades that we need or the skills that we need. That is happening. But I would agree that there is a real challenge also when you are unable to get people in from overseas. And my concern is that with all of the councils in the region looking to increase their investment at the same time, there just aren't going to be the people to be able to deliver on that. So it is top of mind. Just want to reassure that, and I suppose it's a number of different ways to look at how we can actually tackle that challenge. But it's a really good point.
The thing is though, and I love the way the business community works, and I think with the 10-year plan as well, is there are conversations. There are no conversations anywhere about how we get more people. There are just announcements every now and again about what's going to happen. The announcements shock everybody, and the 3.8 billion for brownfields is great, but who's going to build it? 2.2 million for house in New Zealand is great, but who's actually going to build those houses? So there isn't a conversation, and there should be cross-party, cross-city. There isn't a conversation about where we're going to get the resource. Unless I'm deaf, I can't hear it. So I don't want an announcement that's a shock. I want to hear a conversation on, because I think it's going to be a whole lot of incremental measures, and I just can't hear our council or the wider region talking about where we're going to get the resource to do this stuff.
No, take your point.
Another question?
Yeah, there is.
I think at the back there's a gentleman who's been waiting. Yeah.
Helen, is someone going back? We'll come back to you, Helen.
Good morning, Richard from Synthesis Marketing. I was fortunate enough a couple of weeks ago to go to a presentation at the Chamber, which was by New Zealand Transport Agency, Waka Kotahi, and Regional Council and Hutt City Council on the Riverland development. One of the questions that was asked was around the car parking, and it's good that you've come through with some numbers on that, because there seemed to be quite a lot of ambiguity around that when we had that presentation in terms of car parking on the eastern side of the river, in the Riverbank car park. I think the community, both from a residential and a business community, probably support the fact that there'll be some downturn in terms of the number of car parks available during the development work. What we're not seeing during this phase at the moment is the long-term view of what will happen post the development of the riverbank and the options for parking there for businesses. I think there's a great worry by the business community that the parking that's available over towards Westfield will probably start to dominate and will move more of the business and the retail trade towards that side of town rather than towards the western side. So I think it's a concern there. It would just be good to see some of the details coming through during this consultation phase for a long-term plan, so that we can actually have an involvement in that.
Yeah, no, really good points. Take that on board. I can say that we would expect around 350 car parks to return by the end of the project. So if you go by 650 being used on an average day now, we would like that. Well, we'd like the number of people using cars to decrease to using other forms. However, let's say obviously CBD becomes more attractive. We would be looking at around a 300 net loss, and so that's going to need to be factored in. Also, I would note that we will have Manning Station, which will come further south and link up better with the CBD itself. So we're hopeful, and certainly conversations with Regional Council around how that service can be more regular as well once that happens. So yeah, but take your points on board, and we'll make sure that happens through the process.
Can I just say something too? Something that has been mooted.
Bring back the microphone up, so everyone can hear.
Something that has been mooted but is far from definite is that there is the possibility of some sort of car parking building on the western side of the river, and with the footbridge, the pedestrian bridge, which of course Hutt City is doing, that would enable people to quickly access the CBD. But it is at this stage, don't be too excited, it is at this stage just a thought, but there will be some plan B.
Any other questions? Oh, do you want to ask it?
I think it's just around the recycling on the 1st of July.
Where you've got inner city living, and I'm sure it's the same as the CBD as it is with Jackson Street, those properties above the retail and commercial that don't have access to backyards, that put their waste, their recycling out on the street, because we're removing the bags, they're going to be there during the day, and for us with the wind conditions and the demographic of it, Monday to Friday, elderly, these things can become missiles. So we would like the opportunity to talk to councillors and council officers around how we could possibly adapt or mitigate that before we get to the 1st of July, please.
Yeah, and we've already been in touch with MUDs, multi-unit developments, where we have that situation, and we are looking at what are alternative arrangements, because we know they practically won't work what we're going to see in suburban areas. So yeah, that's happening already. Yeah. And happy to link you up as well, so you know what's happening. Yeah.
No, any other questions? I'm going to ask a specific question. Does anyone want to ask about business rates? Because it's the one thing no one's talking about, and we have these engagements to ask the questions that no one wants to talk about. So Does anyone want to talk about business rates? Well, you can ask it, yeah, because it needs to be a discussion that's had. What do you make?
There's always the question about what's fair and what's right, and I know it's, peg in the ground and said this is what we're going to do, but my return thought to that, I don't know what's fair and what's right, but probably the two comments would be there's a lot more, you said yourself, that there's a lot more residential rating units than commercial ones, so what's the spread of some rates across the residential one, you can put them out across a whole lot, that's a lesser pain than it is on business. And the other thing, having been in business my entire life, having my own businesses, there's already a lot of costs. Businesses wear a lot of costs, they take all the risk. If you read the figures, 80% of all startups fail, so there's a lot of risk. And when you do have a business, a small business in Lower Hutt, you work, long hours, and there's so much compliance. So you get burdened with more rates. I'm not saying that's a burden. I just want to raise the point about what is fair, because it's easier to spread rates over a greater number than it is over a smaller number. And my personal view is that without business, and I'd say farmers, but we don't have any rates. That's where everything starts. Everybody works for those people. Everybody has jobs. So it's too tough on business. The formula just doesn't work. So the question is, what is fair? And I suppose other people have got that.
Very good question. Fairness and rates are not particularly two words that should go together very often, because it is a real challenge for us to be able to make judgment calls on what is the appropriate level which sits with commercial ratepayers, residential ratepayers. I suppose what we've seen over the last 10 years, one of the unintended consequences of the changes we made was that alongside the rates differential realignment that occurred was also significant value increases in residential properties, which meant, for example, for houses in the last revaluation year, we're looking at up to 25% rates increases. So that was being seen in some residential areas. And I'm not saying that's the only reason why we look at a bit of a re-levelling. The other thing we really are conscious of is that back in 2010, the commitment that was given, it was essentially looking to land at around that 60% for residential ratepayers and 37% for commercial. So we're trying to meet that point of that commitment that was given even 10 years ago. But it is all very subjective. I'll be very honest with that. It is subjective in our views, and that's why we want to be able to hear from you, to be able to get those submissions in, so we can balance that up versus what our residents say, which certainly are outnumbered on that front. So we want to be able to make sure there are good submissions. That's the role of the Chamber of Commerce, to make sure they advocate on your behalf, but actually having submissions from businesses or commercial property owners is also very helpful.
What consideration have you given to, when you were considering the business residential rates, what consideration have you given to the change in the way you do business now, with a lot of things being sold online? So in my situation, I've invested in a building and renovating a building, and I operate a business and I pay business rates. However, I compete with people operating at homes, and they pay residential rates. And we're seeing a large swing to that, and because people buy things online, and distribute by courier, and there's all one fine ways to do business. But that is a change that will continue to happen. And so what consideration have you given to that when you consider your business residential rates?
Very good question. I don't believe that's come up in the conversations that we've had, so or the analysis. I'll be just quite honest on that. But that's exactly why we want to get feedback and thoughts. So if you can put in a submission and get the council thinking about those types of issues, that's very helpful. So I think it's a really good point. Thank you.
Any other question? Any more question? No? Great, okay. Thank you very much, Campbell. Really appreciate your, just making yourself available really to engage the business community, and certainly the Chamber will be putting in a submission. Do encourage you to put your own in as well. If you've only got one particular point you want to make, or you're not going to get around to the submission, feel free to email the Chamber, and we will make sure it is incorporated in our submission as well. Okay, thanks. questions around the proposed property development contributions policy. So you'll be pleased to know that we're organising a workshop on the 28th of April, which will be at the Chamber, and we'll pop that up on our website probably in the next day or so for you to register. But if you own property or are interested in commercial property and want to talk more about the details of that new contributions policy and how development, some of that infrastructure could be funded going forward, then please join us on the 28th of April at the Chamber, and we've got the main consultant who's been working on the policy coming from, I think, Christchurch, is it Gary? Nelson, and he'll be there to answer questions and get the feedback and our input into that contributions policy. So please note the 28th and email us if you want us to reserve you a spot. I note that many people have already done that, so please do that as well. The other thing I'd like to mention is around housing supply, and whereas most people might think that that's not an issue for business, it's a very big issue when it comes to trying to attract staff and bring people into our region to work for us and to be in our businesses and that sort of thing. So housing supply is a really, really important issue around that. To address one of your questions earlier about around employment, labour shortages, is our confidence surveys tell us is coming back as this strongest barrier against business right now is access to being able to employ skilled and non-skilled staff if you remove COVID from the equation. So, but it's actually really quite close to COVID as a threat to business. So one of the services the Chamber provides is around helping employers employ young people. And so I'll introduce you to Amanda. Amanda Walters is our Education to Employment coordinator. Amanda works very closely with all the schools and works with a wide range of employers across the valley in conjunction with Hutt City Council and Upper Hutt City Council to help us all employ young people. And so if you do have opportunities for young people, can I encourage you to contact Amanda, and we can do organised workplace experience pathways, all sorts of things, apprenticeships, and those sorts of things. And there's just one small part to help address some areas of labour shortages. Doesn't help us at all when it comes to finding skilled people to run major investments and infrastructure projects, or or project managers and those sorts of things. But it is one area that we need to get better at in terms of employing our young people, because there's a lot of them who are unemployed or who don't have much vision of what their career and their vocational future can be. So looking at there's also several people in the room here who are already taking on young people and are finding them useful in their businesses as well. So thank you very much for Campbell for sharing this morning. Thank you very much for all being really interested in the long-term plans. There's so many of them out there at the moment. I think we're all catching up on a year of disruption last year, so if you've got questions, then please contact us and we can help funnel those questions through. Can I also remind you that we are offering a full program of online and in-person events and learning this year for the business community. I think we're doing about a live stream a week at the moment still, and we will continue to do that this year. The property development workshop is coming up on the 28th, so encourage you to attend that. We have our AGM scheduled for the 25th of May. You do need to be a member of the Hutt Chamber of Commerce to attend that AGM. That will be at the Chamber, and we will be looking for new board nominations as well this year. So encourage you, if you want to get more involved, to have a look at looking at the board as an opportunity. And we're also hoping to host the CEO of the Hurricanes in May to share their stories around how they've adapted to COVID-19, and maybe there's some lessons in that for us all as businesses and organisations who are adapting rapidly. Hopefully we'll have a few rugby players joining us as well. So keep an eye on our social media and make sure you're getting our Hutt Valley Business Weekly to keep up to date with everything that's going on. So before we finish our business card drawer, we have a basket of goodies here, which is all Hutt Valley made product, all made foods that you wouldn't know were being produced over in Seaview or on Jackson Street or at Upper Hutt or anywhere. They're amazing when you go to the supermarket, you start looking for made in Katoni made in Lower Hutt, made in Gracefield. So a fabulous basket of goodies. If you haven't put your business card in then please do. You wouldn't want to miss out. Does anyone want to put their business card in who hasn't done that? No? Kim? Anybody? Campbell, can I ask you to draw our business card?
I can't draw your card many after that. James Parker.
Come forward, James. There's some really nice beers from Abandoned Brewery in there, I think. Sorry, a friend from Tim. I love it. Great. Excellent. I have to tell you, it's the people who have product in that basket and have products that are being sent through our port and who are being exported all over the world at the moment that are a big part of our community and our local economy, and we're all going to need each other over the next few years, and we're blessed in the Hutt Valley to have such amazing manufacturers who produce, some very impressive products and very tasty products as well. So before I close, can I also thank all the chamber members in the room. Thank you for your continued support of us in a most challenging time. Your small membership fee that you pay every month is what means we can support the business community through all our advocacy work, all our events and our programs. We can't organise events such as a Mayoral breakfast or an economist lunch or a property development workshop without our members. So thank you all for being members who are. If you are not, then of course we would love to invite you to become a member of the Hutt Valley Chamber of Commerce and get involved in all the things that are happening here as a very vibrant business community. So thank you again for coming this morning. Please stay around for a while and meet each other. Take the opportunity to ask more questions of others in the room and of course various Hutt City Council staff that are here as well. And we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.